Welcome to the Libido Lounge, where we focus on all things love, lust, and libido. We believe that fabulous sex is important to health as exercise and good food. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode on the lounge. We're talking today about how to introduce vibrators into your relationship, how to talk to your partner about how to use them together, and how to begin these conversations. And I think this is a very thrilling conversation because adding vibrator to couple play can add so many different things. It can be valuable because it adds novelty, right? And novelty can really increase passion and drive and dopamine and all these yummy hormones that we talk about on this channel that we can really see that novelty really supports. Now, another reason I love bringing vibrators and talking about vibrators with couples play is because oftentimes, much of the time, there is a huge difference in the speed at which women reach climax versus men, right? We see that some studies say 20 to 40 as far as how long it takes a woman to orgasm. Other studies say even longer. Men, oftentimes it's less than 10 minutes, right? So there's this huge discrepancy. And also, many women do not have a very easy time actually orgasming from vaginal sex. And some theorize that the reason for this is that the location of the outer part of the clitoris, known as the clitoral head, this particular part of the erotic tissue is not always anatomically in the exact same place. And the closer it is to that vaginal opening, right, the closer it is, the more stimulation that multiple positions might give that huge amount of erectile tissue, leading to an ease in orgasm. So if you're somebody that doesn't orgasm super easily during sex, there's a lot that can be said about that. But the first thing to understand is that's normal, that's very, very, very normal. And it's all about your anatomy. It might also be that you need more foreplay, you need more safety, a lot of other things. But if you've seen across relationships and across partners and times in your life that it's very difficult to orgasm with vaginal sex, it probably is that your clitoral head is not in the same anatomical position as people who orgasm very easily that way. So one of the things that sometimes can come up, especially with our lovely male partners, is that we have to be careful because there's some level of misunderstanding that can happen where we have to be careful that we're not, say, hurting an ego, that we're not bringing the vibrator into the bedroom scenario because they're doing something wrong, because they're not pleasing us, any of these types of things, right? There's a huge drive in the masculine to provide, and providing pleasure to one's partner is a huge driving factor. And it's very clear in the way that testosterone brings blood flow to different parts of the brain that men who are ridden with testosterone, they respond in different ways than women. So essentially, when we're talking about the concept of providing, right? And we're talking about, okay, this masculine drive to provide. We want to be careful because we don't want to approach men and make them feel like, oh, we're not happy, we're not satisfied, that they're not providing pleasure, right? That can be very damaging, not only to the ego, but to the relationship. It can be damaging to them feeling safe to enter a sexual intimate moment. So we want to be very, very careful. Now, one of the things I would definitely recommend not to do when introducing a vibrator to a partner is middle of your sexual act, just like whip it out from your nightstand and be like, hey, let's use this. Depending upon where you are in your relationship, like maybe you guys are so experienced in novel things that it is, not a big deal. But if you're somebody that has not tried this before, that doesn't bring novel things in, that doesn't have that level of communication built in yet, it's usually better to show your partner, if they haven't seen your toy, show your partner your toy in advance, tell them what is useful about it, tell them your ideas, and really emphasize that the purpose of this is to bring novelty, to try new things, right? To say like, hey, let's try this. You heard this podcast. You want to know if this will spice things up, to just add a little element. You want to keep passion alive and you just want to experiment, right? So that is a conversation for most people recommend, like, not in the middle of the sexual act, right? Sometimes if if it's amazing like pillow talk in bed, if you think the conversation is going to go well, in bed is a great place for sexy talk about these sorts of things. But if you think that your partner might react a little bit, like say worried about what this means for you and what this means for their performance, then it's better to have this conversation outside of the bedroom so you're not associating the bed with this conversation. Now, if you're new to bringing vibration into your life, or if you're new to bring vibration into your couple play, one of the tools I actually recommend is the bullet. So I have a bullet right here. Bullets are super, super easy. They're user friendly. They have tiny little buttons on the top. You can select them on and off. And one of the great things I like about them is how easy they fit in the hand. So you can cup them in your hand, or your partner can cup them in their hand, and they can be used in many different types of locations and many different types of positions, I should say. Locations too. But from that standpoint, the idea with this, right, is like when you are actually going for sexual penetration, you can use one of these to actually stimulate clitoris, erotic tissue, and you can, from that standpoint, sometimes narrow that gap between male orgasm and female orgasm. So that's a benefit as well. So when you're talking to your partner, you can, also say like, hey, I learned from this podcast that it would be very helpful for me to get more clitoral stimulation because of perhaps the location of my clitoris, right? You can, speak logically, right? Logic is a very, very good thing because it helps understand like this is not about them. This is not a problem. This is basically based upon the anatomy of how you're built, and continue to bring it back to the things that you love about sexual intimacy, right? You can even say things like, oh, that position that I really love, I'm just curious if it'll add more novelty, if it'll mix things up, if it'll increase my pleasure to the next level if I add this vibrator. Do you want to try it on me? That's a really good question because, again, we want to come back to this whole concept of this is not replacing, right? We're not replacing, we are adding to. And so when we invite them to say, try it on us, that allows to that invitation to say, you're included in this conversation. I want you part of this play. I want you part of this experience, right? So that's really the idea, is like that invitation in. And the other thing I always say when we're talking about any sort of communication things is, never have a conversation about any of this sexy stuff when somebody is super stressed out, when they've had a long day at work. Any of those scenarios are not setting us up for success, because it's really important that we are calm when we're going into talking about sex, right? We're talking about how to raise pleasure. And if we're doing that from like the stressed out state, and somebody can't hear that you're not actually attacking them or saying that they're doing something wrong in bed, and essentially you want to add or enhance to the sex life. If somebody's stressed, sometimes the only thing we can hear in stress is like, oh my gosh, I'm doing something wrong. Oh my gosh, I've let them down again, right? So we want to make sure that those types of sensations or those types of emotions are never correlated with sex. It's like we might make mistakes, and we do recovery work for mistakes, but essentially we want to go in proactively and avoid that as much as possible. So another fun thing, if you guys are having this conversation, this can be a really fun foreplay thing too, is to take a trip to a sex store together, or to shop for a device online, right? Some of these devices, like this device here is +1. This device is even in Walmart, right? So some of these devices are very, very accessible for people. So if you're new to this and you're like, oh, I'm not ready for the sex store, you can actually even find some vibrators in Walmart, because vibrators are now seen so much as devices that are helpful for health, that are good for pelvic floor dysfunction and so many other things, right? So, kind of to sum up the do's, have a conversation, right? Ask questions, show them how it works, right? Ask for permission. Talk about the benefit that you think it will provide, not only you, but also relationship wise. Talk about the novelty, talking about the things you love about sex, right? The things you love about sex with your partner, your favorite positions, the things that they do the best that you just love so much and you want to enhance even more. So the idea is to, talk about it from like, we're going to make this even better. And, versus like, that was horrible. That's like not a helpful frame usually in this conversation. And then from there, the do nots. So be very careful about breaking this out for the first time in the middle of sex. I would not do that. Once you've had the conversation and now you have an open dialogue, you might say, do you need me? You might ask them, like, do you need me to ask you ahead of sex if I can bring this out? Is this something you're open to that I can just reach into the nightstand and grab it whenever it feels good? So find out your partner's needs, ask questions, and then formulate a plan that feels good for both of you guys to feel like you're provided for and that your needs are met and safety is there and comfort is there and all of those things. So do not talk about like, oh, this thing is going to make things so much better, right? So I would avoid any sort of comparison types of things. And do not have these conversations in a stressful time period. So those are your big do's and do nots. I really encourage you all to, to try this, experiment with yourself to learn your body even more. But bringing this into partner play really does add a level of novelty, of dopamine. It can, like I said, it can narrow that discrepancy between time for women to orgasm, time for man to orgasm. You can control a woman's orgasm a lot more, meaning it's a lot easier to create that build and even have co-orgasmic experiences more easily. So there's a lot of really cool benefits that can come from adding a vibrator into partner play. My favorite personally is just that novelty, right? It's just, there's so many different vibrators out there. There's so many different types of speeds. There's so many different things we can do with them. So from a standpoint of long-term relationships and keeping that dopamine and that drive and that motivation to keep it hot and sexy, part of how we do that is novelty. And this is a really great, easy way to add a lot of novelty into the play experience. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope you will join me for another episode. This is Dr. Diane reminding you to always stay sexy, always stay classy, and to be a little badassy. Thank you for listening to the Libido Lounge. Please don't keep me a secret. Please share this with your friends. You can find me on YouTube, on Instagram, as well as how to work with me at mylibidodoc.com.